Wonder why I always dress in black. You never see bright colors on my back. Why does my appearance seem to have a somber tone? There's a reason for the things I got on. I'll wear the black for the poor and the beaten down, living in a hopeless, hungry side of town. I'll wear it for the prisoner who's long paid for his crime. He's there because he's a victim of the time. I'll wear the black for those who never read or listen to the words that Jesus said about the road to happiness through love and charity. Why you think he was talking straight to you and me? We're doing mighty fine, I do suppose, in a street good line and cars and fancy clothes. Just so we're reminded of the ones who are held back. Up front there ought to be a man in black. And I'll wear it for the sick and lonely old, for the reckless ones whose bastards left them cold. I'll wear the black in the morning for lives that could have been. Every week we lose 100 fine new men. And I'll wear it for the thousands who have died, believing that the Lord was on their side. I'll wear it for another 100,000 who have died, believing that we all were on their side. But there's things that never will be right, I know. Things need changing everywhere you go. Till we start to make a move, to make a few things right, you'll never see me wear that suit of white. Oh, I'd love to wear a rainbow every day, tell the world that everything's okay. I'll try to carry off little darkness on my black. Well then, I'm the man in black.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Man in Black show. I hope I find you all well as can be expected, let's say. How are you, Alex? I haven't chatted to you for a few days. Well, apart from, online.
Yeah.
Are you okay?
Not too bad.
Good. No, not too bad is the standard for Alex. Not too bad. Okay, so today I'm going to kind of wrap up what I was talking about last week, and last week I was talking about the interwar years and what really kind of led to World War II. Now, prior to that, I talked about the Cuban Revolution. And these two subjects kind of presented themselves to me. I didn't go out looking for them. As I've often said, these kind of things just pop into my head. And I think perhaps they do that because right now it feels to me, and I don't know if many of you feel the same way, but it feels to me like we're on the edge of a great change. We're on the cusp of something. I don't know, what would you call it? Like the beginning of a new epoch, like the beginning of a whole new system. And this kind of thing seems to happen regularly. It happens sometimes globally, sometimes locally. As in individual countries. But this time, for me, it feels like one of those uh, global shifts. That shift could lead us in one of a number of directions. Um, it could lead us into a major global war yet again. It could lead us into a completely new system, a new monetary system, a new financial reset. It could lead us into, being more and more controlled. It could do all of those things. It could do one or none or all of them. But we are, as it were, on the edge of another great climactic change. That's how it feels. And in some way, that's perhaps what I put down to the inspiration for wanting to talk about revolution, for wanting to talk about cataclysmic war. Perhaps not the actual war. As I said to Alex earlier, I'm not expecting this series that I'm doing, in fact, which I'm going to sort of bring to a close tonight. I didn't want to touch the Second World War because the Second World War is such an enormous subject, such a complex web of interconnected things that really would be a huge undertaking and probably run to many programs. So I thought what I'd look at and what I started to look at last week was what led up to the Second World War, how events moved, who were the major players, how did they interact, and what was the result? Well, we know what the result was. So this week I'm going to conclude that, and obviously the Second World War happened. We slid into the Second World War in a kind of inevitable way. It was an inevitable consequence almost of the events that led to it. Okay. So having Antonio, you're nothing but a bee charmer, and that's what you are, a bee charmer. I think he's talking to Janet. I don't know if is there an art of bee charming. I don't know. It's nice to be charming, I suppose, but I think he's talking about charming bees. All right, perhaps he'll explain. Okay. All right. So where were we? So last week we kind of ended with Hitler becoming chancellor in 1933, and how the enabling acts gave him the power to rule for 4 years without any other parties to challenge him, and how he began to basically rule by executive order, you might say, by diktat. Now, I explained how Hitler's Nazi party purged all German institutions, and anybody that they considered what you might call an enemy of the state. and how they took over running all of those institutions under Nazi policies. And this included, as I mentioned, included the press and the radio. They controlled the media. And just as we looked last week, I said to you last week, look out for perhaps things that rhyme, things that sound familiar. And this, as I said, this controlling of the press and the radio, this sort of media, what you might call media clampdown that they had, is for me one of the reminiscent things of our times. And then I went on to describe how Hitler courted the European and the British and the American press, who it seemed were only too willing to extol the virtues of his regime, that nice Mr. Hitler. Now, the only country that kind of raised any concern, you might say, or had any suspicions about Hitler were really the French, because the French had lost a good proportion of their repatriation payments, you might say, those payments that were being made under the Treaty of Versailles. And they'd also lost, they'd seen that reparations schedule dwindled down under the Dawes Plan of 1924. But France itself, like much of Europe, was going through its own political upheavals. The actual ruling coalition of left-wing parties were constantly being challenged by parties akin, very similar to Hitler's Nazi Party. And the slogan on the right was better Hitler than Leon Blum. And here we can see at slide 1, this is Leon Blum. There he is. Now, he was the socialist prime minister. And as I say, he was the head of a coalition government of left-leaning and socialist parties. Now, the United States under Franklin D. Roosevelt were at this time becoming increasingly isolationist. And they had little care, really, you might say, for events in Europe. Perhaps something that is yet again being played out. Now, the American entry into World War I was viewed very widely as serving only the bankers and the arms manufacturers. That was a very widely held view in post-World War I America. And the sort of idea that was abroad is we don't want to get dragged into this kind of thing again, because it didn't, all it did was kill our young men, and we never really benefited from it. So that was kind of one of the drivers that started America along this path of what you might call isolationism. Okay, so this had the effect of America producing two acts between 1935 and another one in 1937. Slide 2, please, Alex. These were called the Neutrality Acts of 1935 and 1937. As it says here, with growing aggression in Europe during the 1930s, the US passed two Neutrality Acts, which forbade America from lending money or aid to anyone engaged in an overseas war. Would that it were today. Now, this would end in 1939 when the USA began to lend money to Britain and France, but that will be at the end of our story tonight. Okay. So really the message was clear. America didn't wish to be drawn into another European conflict, nor did it want to finance one. Now, the Soviet Union under Stalin was really focused at this time on the transformation of the country and all the sort of the early 5-year plans. And these were seeing rapid industrialization and also forced collectivism in the agricultural sector. But Stalin viewed Nazi Germany very warily, and he recognized that Hitler represented a danger. Russia had actually reached out to many European countries, including Britain, offering mutual cooperation treaties, mutual defense pacts. But Britain rejected these approaches as it both distrusted and feared, really, communism. And also partly because of the way that Stalin was acting at this time. During this time, he was undergoing the Russian military were undergoing a great purge between 1936 and 1938. And in this purge, Stalin executed or imprisoned most of the Red Army officer corps. Slide 3, please, Alex. So here we see some of the some men about to be hung during this purge. Not only were army, the sort of old guard of the army officer corps got rid of, but anyone else that Stalin considered a threat to his power. Now, these two factors, the sort of total distrust of communism coupled with a historic distrust of Russia, and the way that Stalin was acting, really deterred Britain and France from from building any sort of military alliance with Russia. So we can say that during this time, there was a fragmentation amongst the what were to become the Allies. And these alliances been formed, they may very well have deterred Hitler, but they weren't. So you can see that this is a factor that plays into perhaps Hitler's behavior. Okay. Now, meanwhile, Japan had descended into what you might call military imperialism. And that military imperialism absolutely resented Western domination and, fostered a belief, you might say, in Japan's divine destiny to lead Asia. Japan was by now occupying the entire province of Manchuria in China, and we can see some troops in Manchuria at slide 4. And the population of Manchuria at that time was around about 30 million. So Japan were dominating a large slice of China. Now, the League of Nations at this time produced a report which in no uncertain terms, you would say, declared that Japan should return Manchuria to China. And Japan's response was to leave the League of Nations. They just walked out, obviously while keeping Manchuria. So no military action was taken or even considered against Japan. And again, this was a lesson for Hitler, which was really that the great democracies would talk, they would investigate, and they would condemn, but however, they would not fight. They would not offer any resistance to those who were essentially breaking international law. Again, perhaps a point that we can see that we have seen mirrored today. Okay. So I'm bouncing around all of the different countries to give you a kind of perspective on how the world situation was at this time. So let's go to Italy. Now, Italy under Benito Mussolini had actually been the original template since 1922 for European fascism. Slide 5, please, Alex. Mussolini had completely dismantled democracy. He'd banned the opposition parties. He controlled the press, and he established a secret police force. And he was busy promoting the corporate state, which, if you remember about what the definition of fascism is, the melding, you might say, of corporate power and state power. So this is what Mussolini was engaged in. And he saw this as a third way between the two major forces that were at play right across the world, capitalism and communism. So what Mussolini considered was that this was a different way of addressing how to run a country. Fascism was an alternative to both capitalism and an alternative to communism. Now, Mussolini was an early influence on Hitler, who absolutely admired Mussolini long before his own rise to power. Hitler had developed a relationship with Mussolini right from the start. But early on, Hitler can be said to have been perhaps the more junior partner. But by the mid-1930s, however, that relationship was shifting. Germany's rapidly growing power was beginning to make Italy's position more one of being dependent. So Germany was in the ascendance. And that's one which Mussolini really found uncomfortable, but obviously one that he could not reverse, one that he did not have the power to reverse. Mussolini's ambitions, you might say, lay outside of Europe because his ambitions focused on building an Italian empire in Africa. This is where Mussolini's thought that Italy could flex its muscles again, you might say, in Africa. And specifically, what Mussolini was interested in was the conquest of Ethiopia, one of the last remaining independent African states at that time, and a country that, famously had defeated the Italian army at the Battle of Adwa in 1896. And here we can see sort of an illustration from the Battle of Adowa, in which the Italians were completely routed, and in which essentially, which established Ethiopia's independence, you might say. Now, all this happened during what was called the First Italian-Ethiopian War, a war that's quite often one of those wars that's lost to most scholars. You know, it's you won't often hear about anybody talking about the Italian-Ethiopian War, but it certainly happened. Now, like I said, essentially this major battle secured Ethiopia's sovereignty, and it was a humiliating defeat for Italy. And that was something that Italy had never forgotten. And so in October 1933, Mussolini's Italian forces once more invaded Ethiopia. And they came in through Eritrea and Somaliland. And they came in with a force of 300,000 Italians. And those Italians were equipped with modern artillery, they had aircraft, and they had chemical weapons. The Ethiopians under Emperor Haile Selassie, they fought back bravely with extraordinary courage, but their equipment was no match for Italy's tanks and the mustard gas that they employed, something that had come out of the First World War. So Italy used modern weaponry to defeat. Excuse me a minute. Something's happened to my phone. No, that's okay. So they used modern weaponry against what was essentially an unmodernized army. Now, Haile Selassie, the Ethiopian emperor, you might say, or the Ethiopian leader, went to the League of Nations, and he addressed the League of Nations in 1936, and he pleaded with the nations to come to Ethiopia's aid. And he stressed that if Ethiopia fell, it would lead to others going the same way. But that appeal really fell on deaf ears. There was a lot of sympathy, and there was vocal support, but rather than any concrete action against Italy, that was not forthcoming. And Ethiopia was conquered by May of 1936 by the Italians. So yet again, the League of Nations had proved itself to be a talking shop. It produced a lot of words on paper, but in the end, it was a paper tiger. It had no teeth. Okay. Now, the League of Nations, like I said, had once again failed to do anything of substance, just like they failed to do anything in Manchuria. Now, in the same year, 1936, Italy and Germany announced what was called the Rome-Berlin Axis. The Rome-Berlin Axis. That was a political partnership that declared their combined values and opposition to the existing international order. Slide 7, please. There we are. Okay. Yeah, another slide of Hitler and Mussolini. Now, all the while, German rearmament had been going on. In fact, it had been going on secretly ever since World War I. but it picked up significantly in the early years of the Nazi regime. And in March 1935, Hitler openly announced the existence of a new German air force, the Luftwaffe, obviously, the Luftwaffe commanded by Hermann Göring. Now, Hitler also announced the reintroduction of compulsory military service and his intention that he was going to build up the army to 36 divisions and 500,000 men. Those actions were, well, they were basically direct and open violations of the Treaty of Versailles, which had set limits on German armed forces. Britain and France protested, but they took no action. They did nothing about it. They were vocal, but they took no action. Now, in the same year, Britain went on to sign the German Naval Agreement. Slide 8, please, Alex. So this is the Anglo-Naval Agreement. Britain agreed to allow the German Navy to grow in size up to 35% of the strength of the British Navy. So they formally accepted German naval rearmament on the condition that Germany limit its naval fleet to this 35%. But what this slide doesn't tell you is that they also agreed that it could have 45% of Britain's fleet in terms of submarines. And submarines went on to be extremely important in World War II. Okay, so across the board, Germany was rearming, and it was doing so openly, with perhaps protestations, but in some cases cooperation, but no real action. Okay, now the French, when they saw this Anglo-German naval agreement, were absolutely furious. The Anglo-Naval Agreement could be said to be one of the most short-sighted acts in the interwar diplomacy. In these interwar years, Germany had got the right, or gained the right, but without any sacrifice. Britain had basically said, yeah, that's fine. We agree. You can build up your navy. And at this time, naval power was still extremely important in the world. And this really sent a signal not only to Hitler, but to the world, that Britain would accept Germany's open violations of the Treaty of Versailles. It wasn't, in fact, what you might say was a green light for Germany's rearmament, for that whole program. Now, on March the 7th, 1936, Hitler sent troops into the Rhineland. And this was an area, if you can remember last week, that was after World War I, the Rhineland became a demilitarized buffer zone between Germany and France. And here's a headline from a newspaper at the time, at slide 9. German troops enter Rhineland. Okay. Now, Hitler had actually given his troops, the troops that occupied the Rhineland, he had given them secret orders that stated if French forces resisted, then that they were to retreat immediately. So Hitler had, by this time, still did not have the confidence that his forces could perhaps engage in a war with France, or perhaps it was just a delaying tactic. But he certainly considered that he shouldn't, his forces shouldn't come into conflict with France. It was a gamble, basically. It was a gamble by Hitler, and one that paid off. The French didn't resist, and this is because, in many ways, France was in the middle of a political crisis. The French foreign minister was ill, and the French the French generals, let's say, overestimated German strength. So there were problems. Let's say there were problems. The French generals considered that they could not take on Germany, and the Germans likewise didn't really want to take on France. But nevertheless, this reoccupation, was successful, and the British made it clear that they wouldn't support any French military action. So once again, the bricks were kicked out in terms of international cooperation. Britain's Foreign Secretary, Anthony Eden, told the French Britain would not go to war over what he said was Hitler marching into his own backyard. So that's pretty straightforward. We're not going to, Germany wants to reoccupy something that was given to France after World War One. We're not going to stand in the way because we consider it belongs to Germany anyway. So the French couldn't count on any support. Now, Germany, turning back to Germany, Germany was now free to build up fortifications on the Rhine. And these were the defenses that Hitler had planned to defend his flank in the west, while Germany concentrated on Soviet territory to the east. Seizing territory to the east. This actually was a plan that Hitler had laid out. He laid this plan out in Mein Kampf a decade earlier. And so it really shouldn't have taken anyone by surprise. Anyone who had read Mein Kampf would know that this was entirely what Hitler proposed to do. But it seemed to take people by surprise. Okay. Now, a major occurrence at this time was the Spanish Civil War. And the Spanish Civil War added another dimension to this gathering storm. In July 1936, General Francisco Franco, and here's Franco at slide 10, in case you've forgotten what he looked like, which many people don't know any longer, because this is rapidly becoming something that happened, this is 100 years ago, or just shy of 100 years ago. So General Franco launched a military revolt in Spain, and this triggered a civil war that really drew in all the major European powers. Germany and Italy intervened on Franco's side. Hitler saw this civil war as an opportunity to test out new weapon systems, and test out new tactics. Slide 11. Okay. Now, whilst he was testing out these new weapons and tactics, it also served to support Franco and establish another fascist regime in Europe. Additionally, he saw it as a way to weaken France by establishing a potentially hostile country on its southern flank. So there were several reasons why Germany was interested in supporting Franco. The German Condor Squadron, which this is a slide of, operated over Spain and practiced things like ground support, air attack, and strategic bombing. So, like I say, it was an ideal opportunity for Hitler to test out these new weapons. And these tactics were ones that would employ to devastating effect in the years to come. Now, officially, Britain and France adopted a policy of non-intervention, and they set up a non-intervention committee that met in London. Now, strangely enough, this non-intervention committee actually included representatives from Italy and Germany, both of whom were, actively intervening. Now, the committee essentially was a complete farce. Germany and Italy both denied that they had any involvement whatsoever in the Spanish Civil War, whilst continuing to pour weapons and men into Franco's army. Now, this war ended in April 1939 with Franco's victory. Its importance, you might say, in the origins of the Second World War really lay in several directions. It gave both Germany and Italy valuable operational experience, and it demonstrated the capabilities of Germany's new weapons, their weapon systems, and it deepened the divide between fascism and communism across Europe, making it harder for the Western democracies to build alliances against Germany with the Soviets. So it deepened the distrust of communism and therefore made it far harder for the mostly unwilling British to have any kind of alliance with Soviet Russia. And it set a precedent. It set a precedent for pre-war diplomacy, you might say. What would happen is the fascist powers would act, and they would act with force, while the democracies would hesitate and deliberate and ultimately accommodate and appease. So that was a pattern that was set. Now, by 1937 and into 1938, the pace was accelerating into a situation people could see coming, but really few knew how to prevent. So people could see the storm clouds on the horizon. People knew what was happening, but no one could seem to bridge the gap, neither diplomatically, and no one was prepared to bridge the gap militarily in order to stop Germany's build-up. Now, Hitler had completed the transformation by this time of Germany into a totalitarian state, in which his word was absolute law. Nevertheless, the majority of ordinary Germans absolutely loved him. There was almost full employment. Slide 12, please, Alex. How much of that employment was lay in the arms sector, but there had also been large investments into pre-war Germany by large American corporations such as Ford. Slide 18, please. 13, please, Alex. And this is one of Henry Ford's car plants in pre-war Germany. Now, these plants started off making cars, but they quickly transformed into war production once war broke out. Now, the Nazis also invested in Germany's healthcare system, its healthcare infrastructure, you might say. Slide 14, please, Alex. And this is the German hospital at the time. And they also built a complete system of modern transport infrastructure, such as the Reichsautobahns. That whole network of autobahns that we still have today was put in place by Nazi Germany. Slide 15, please, Alex. Albeit they were made of concrete and not that pleasant to drive on, but nevertheless, there was a countrywide network of reliable, fast motorways, you might say, autobahns. And this, again, the whole atmosphere of pre-war Germany was one of industrialization, industry, and people's willingness to follow Hitler's lead and follow his dream. Okay. So this road network was the best and most modern road network in Europe, and the Germans were rightly proud of it, and they were rightly proud of all of the achievements that people saw Hitler doing. Everyone was doing their bit, and there was a spirit of collective German pride that was possessing the whole nation. Now, of course, this didn't apply to all sections of German society. The Nuremberg laws of 1935, they had stripped Jews of German citizenship. They prohibited marriage or relationships between Jews and non-Jews. And they prevented Jews from participating in the economic and cultural life of Germany. So the Jews were cut off. And this came to a head in November 1938 with Kristallnacht. Now, Kristallnacht saw Nazi paramilitary units attack Jews and Jewish businesses and synagogues and Jewish homes right across Germany and Austria. Slide 16, please, Alex. Okay. Around about 100 people died in that one night, and 30,000 Jewish men were arrested and sent to concentration camps. The world saw all of this, but no government acted. There were the usual voices raised, but no real action. And that is because there was also an anti-Jewish sentiment abroad in many countries at this time. Now, also in 1938, Hitler kind of followed Stalin's lead, and he conducted a purge of what you might call the old guard, the conservative old guard officers in the military. And also anyone who had expressed concern or caution, any military figure that had advised caution in the way that Germany was militarily forging ahead, they were dismissed, and many of the senior figures were dismissed on trumped-up charges. The entire command structure of the Wehrmacht was reorganized, with Hitler himself as supreme commander of all German armed forces. Hitler actually made it very clear that no dissent would be tolerated and only total loyalty and obedience was acceptable. Something we may yet again see reflected in our own time. Now, Austria was the first real item on Hitler's territorial list, his territorial agenda. And on February the 12th, 1938, Hitler summoned the Austrian Chancellor, Kurt Schuschnigg. Excuse me. I just have to have a little drink. He summoned Kurt Schuschnigg to his mountain retreat at Berchtesgaden. And we can see them there together here at slide 17. Okay. Now, when Schuschnigg visited Hitler at the Berchtesgaden, Hitler subjected him to a lengthy humiliation, making demands backed actually by threats of military action if they were not met. Hitler demanded Austrian Nazis were brought into the Austrian government in key ministerial positions, and that Austria align its foreign policy totally with Germany's. Now, Schuschnigg returned to Austria, and in what you might call a last desperate gamble, he announced a people's vote on independence from Germany to be held on March the 13th, 1938. He had calculated that Austrians, given a free and fair vote, a free choice, would vote to remain independent. Now, Hitler could not allow this to take place because it might show that even given Austrian Nazi sympathies, that the Austrians did not want a forced absorption into Germany. He demanded that the vote be cancelled and that Schuschnigg resigned, and that Schuschnigg was replaced by a leading Nazi, a man called Arthur Seyss-Inquart. And here he is at slide 18. This is the man that Hitler thought would be a much better leader for Austria. Now, Britain and France made it clear, once again, that they would not intervene if Germany annexed Austria. And faced with German troops massed on its borders, Schuschnigg resigned. And on the morning of March the 12th, 1938, German forces crossed the Austrian border in what was called Operation Otter. They met no resistance, and Hitler himself followed, and he entered his hometown of Linz to scenes of I don't know, what you might call popular enthusiasm. Slide 19, please, Alex. And here we can see it, Hitler entering Linz. Now, the way that the Austrian people reacted actually appeared to surprise even Hitler. He was kind of expecting some resistance, but there was absolutely none, and there seemed to be an overwhelming support for his annexation. Now, on March the 13th, what was called the Anschluss was formally declared, and Austria ceased to exist as an independent state, becoming instead what was called the Ostmark, the eastern province of Greater Germany. Okay. Now, the Western powers, surprise, surprise, protested, but they took no action. They didn't, they considered, well, perhaps Austria does belong to Germany. And they just let that happen. Okay. Now, the strategic consequences for Europe were severe. Czechoslovakia was now surrounded on three sides by Germany. Czechoslovakia also had mutual assistance treaties, both with France and with the Soviet Union. So on paper, it was what you might think was a defensible country with a reasonable army and powerful allies. But in reality, it was about to be sacrificed by these allies on the altar, yet again, the altar of appeasement. Hitler used the German-speaking region of the Sudetenland and their leader, a man called Konrad Ittenlein. And here he is at slide 20. Now, Ittenlein, he was actually receiving direct details, instructions, and also funding from Berlin. And he was personally briefed by Hitler, who instructed him to make demands on the Czechoslovakian government, demands that Hitler knew would be rejected. But they weren't really designed for that. They were designed to escalate the tension and provide a pretext for German invasion. Henlein's party adopted what were called the Carlsbad decrees, which demanded full autonomy for the Sudetenland and the right to align with Germany's Nazi ideology. Now, the Czech government, surprisingly, went a long way towards meeting his demands, but no concession was ever enough. And throughout the summer of 1938, Hitler made a series of threatening speeches about the suffering of the Sudeten Germans under the Czech oppression, as he described it, under Czech oppression. And German preparations for an attack on Czechoslovakia were accelerated. Now, the Czech military mobilized when false reports of an imminent invasion were put about. And this, kind of along with rumors of possible Western assistance, temporarily paused Hitler's plans. So he kind of held off his planned invasion. But it really only served to fuel Hitler's determination to crush Czechoslovakia. And by September of 1938, Europe appeared once again to be sliding towards war. France had treaty obligations, like I said, with Czechoslovakia, and the Soviet Union itself had offered to honor its obligations if France did so as well. So that there was a potential of the Soviet Union becoming involved if Germany invaded. There was the potential of France getting involved. Now, Britain's position was pretty uncertain, and Neville Chamberlain, let's put slide 21 up, please, Alex. Neville Chamberlain decided to personally fly to Germany, and on September the 15th, Hitler received him, Neville Chamberlain, at Berchtesgaden. And Hitler told Chamberlain directly and bluntly that if he demanded that he demanded the Sudetenland, and that he was prepared to start a world war to get it. Chamberlain flew home and began to work with the French to produce a proposal that demanded all areas of Czechoslovakia with more than 50% German-speaking people living there would be ceded to Germany. On September the 19th, this demand was presented to the Czech government, making it clear that if they rejected this proposal and went to war with Germany, it would do so without the support of Britain and France. Czechoslovakia accepted these terms, but soon discovered really that they were not enough. When Chamberlain flew back to Germany, he found the stakes had been, Hitler had turned the tables. He'd raised the stakes. He now demanded immediate occupation of the Sudetenland by October the 1st, and also tabled new demands from Poland and Hungary that also wanted areas of Czech territory. Chamberlain returned home with his proposal in ruins, basically, and he told the cabinet that Hitler was determined to have war. Now, in September 1938, that war seemed genuinely imminent. The British Navy was mobilised, and air raid trenches were dug in London's parks, which we can see here at slide 22. Okay. And gas masks were distributed to all British citizens. And then at perhaps what you might say was the last moment, Mussolini, of all people, intervened with the British. And he urged for a four-party conference. Now, maybe it was because Hitler was not entirely ready for a major war. Who knows? But in September 1938, he accepted the idea. And this became what was known as the Munich Conference. The Munich Conference of September the 29th and 30th. And here we can see a slide of it, please, Alex. Slide 23, please. So this is kind of the Munich Conference. Now this, you might say, was perhaps the low point. It was the low point in European diplomacy. And it was probably the lowest point of diplomacy in the entire interwar period. The leaders of France, Britain, Germany, and Italy sat around a table to decide the fate of a country that had absolutely no representative in the room. Czechoslovakia was told what had been decided afterwards, and told if it rejected the terms, it would face Germany alone. The Soviet Union was not invited, nor was it consulted. And the terms that came out of this conference gave Germany all of the Sudetenland, which we can kind of see here at slide 24. There we go. So the Sudetenland is an area that almost surrounds Czechoslovakia. It's the mountainous regions, you might say, of Czechoslovakia. It gave Germany, entirely gave the Sudetenland to Germany, along with all its fortifications and all of its industry, all of its manufacturing plants. And it did so in exchange for German and Italian guarantees not to expand the area that was under control. Chamberlain returned to Britain, holding the terms and read it to the awaiting press and crowds at Heston Aerodrome, describing it as a symbol of our two people, a symbol that our two peoples never intended to go to war with each other again. Slide 25, please, Alex. And there he is holding this piece of paper. And later that evening, he leaned out of a window in 10 Downing Street and shouted down to press and people waiting below that it was peace for our time. So that is where this idea of him saying peace for our time, he didn't actually say it on the airfield, he said it later on. But this was the idea that Chamberlain had managed to negotiate a peace. Okay. Now, Hitler himself, in private, expressed complete contempt for just how easily the other leaders had accepted his annexation of the Sudetenlands. He'd kind of expected a bit of a fight. He'd kind of almost wanted a military campaign against Czechoslovakia that would once again demonstrate Germany's power. So he kind of felt cheated of his, what would have been a military victory. And he told his generals that he had been robbed of the rest of Czechoslovakia by a damned umbrella-wielding old man, referring to Chamberlain, obviously. Now, in truth, what Munich had reinforced for Hitler was the idea that the Western democracies would always retreat from conflict, and that escalating demands and threats of conflict would always result in concessions, and that the leaders of these democracies were weak. And within only 6 months of the Munich Agreement, that agreement would be exposed as the fraud that it always was. Slide 26, please. Okay. On March the 15th, 1939, German forces invaded what was left of Czechoslovakia, and they occupied it without resistance. Bohemia and Moravia became German protectorates. Slovakia, under German pressure, became independent, but it was really a puppet state of Germany's. Now, Czechoslovakia had now, like Austria, ceased to exist. This was nothing but raw conquest. And Chamberlain was, you might say, publicly humiliated. But he was privately furious. Sorry about the bell. And he began to denounce Germany as an expansionist military power who wanted to dominate the world by force. Now, this reversal of Britain's policy towards Germany happened really quickly. On March the 31st, 1939, Britain gave security guarantees to Poland and a unilateral guarantee that if Poland were attacked by Germany, Britain would come to its aid. France followed with a similar commitment. But Britain and France were militarily weak. Hitler's assessment was completely factual, because Britain in particular had downsized their forces in what they believed would be an era of peace following the war to end all wars, World War One. They had really failed or were not willing to make military alliances with the Soviet Union. And so the Polish guarantees were essentially quite flimsy. The only real power that could place troops on Germany's eastern flank was the Soviet Union. And they had not been consulted, yet again, they'd not been consulted about, about Russian troops. They'd not been consulted on putting Russian troops on Polish soil, and the Baltic states were kind of equally as resistant. All of them were really in fear of a return of Russian imperial power. Now, a conference, yet another conference between Britain, France, and Russia produced no meaningful progress on how to react if Germany invaded Poland, or indeed any of the Baltic states. Stalin really decided that these talking shops were meaningless, and he concluded the only course was for Russia to seek a deal with Germany itself. Now, this raised the spectre in Britain and France that Russia and Germany would form a pact that would allow Germany to take Poland and the Baltic states without interference from the Soviets. Hitler really needed the Russians to remain neutral. He needed this for his plans of annexing these countries. And what Stalin really wanted were buffer states in between itself and the Nazis. Now, in the summer of 1938, there were secret meetings that took place in Berlin between Moscow and Berlin on a non-aggression pact. Slide 28, please, Alex. Okay. I must have missed a slide. Now, Ribbentrop, who we can see on the right here, the Nazi Minister of Foreign Affairs, flew to Moscow on August the 23rd and signed, along with the Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov, the German-Soviet Non-Aggression Pact, which committed both to neutrality if either one was attacked by a third party. Now, the pact also contained what is known as the secret protocol, which actually divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. And this is something that the Soviets always denied, but was eventually revealed in 1989. Finland, Estonia, Eastern Poland, and Latvia were all assigned to the Soviet Union, while Western Poland was given to Germany. The Baltic states would be occupied by the Soviet Union, and Germany would retain Czechoslovakia, most of Romania, and Slovakia. The news of the pact really was announced on August the 24th. And the upshot of this pact meant Germany was free to attack Poland without fear of Soviet intervention. It meant that war had become a near certainty. Britain and France immediately warned Germany that they would honor their commitments to Poland. But Hitler basically dismissed these warnings telling his generals Britain and France were spineless worms and would not fight. The final preparations for war were made in the last days of August 1934. Hitler issued a series of demands saying, slide 29, please, Alex. He issued a series of demands saying Danzig and the Polish corridor that had existed since the peace conference of 1921 be returned to Germany. Now, these demands, again, we've seen this tactic used by Hitler. These demands were not designed to be accepted in a similar way to the demands on the Sudetenland. They were only there to give the semblance of negotiating points. Now, as expected, Poland refused. They refused to submit to the demands made under military threat. So they said they would not respond to demands made under military threat. It would not do what Czechoslovakia had done. Now, on the night of August the 31st, 1939, SS troops dressed in Polish uniforms staged a false flag attack on the German radio station at Gleiwitz. Slide 30, please, Alex. Okay, so they staged this attack on this radio station near the Polish border, acting directly on Hitler's orders. German concentration camp inmates were given Polish uniforms and then shot and left at the scene as alleged Polish casualties. Now, using this as a pretext that Poland had attacked Germany unprovoked, at 4:45 on the morning of September the 1st, German forces crossed the Polish border on multiple fronts in what was to become known as a blitzkrieg or lightning war. Slide 31, please. Okay. Now, the conquest of Poland took only 5 weeks. Britain delivered its ultimatum to Germany on the morning of September the 3rd. Remember, they had invaded on the morning of September the 1st. Well, on the morning of September the 3rd, Britain delivered its ultimatum, demanding that Germany withdraw its forces from Poland and that it was to indicate that their intention was to do so. And it was to make this indication by 11 a.m. on that morning. When no reply came, Britain declared war on Germany at 11:15 a.m. on September the 3rd, 1939. The Second World War had begun. When Neville Chamberlain, slide 37, please, Alex.
That's quite away from where we are. Do you mean
30?
Yeah,
we're bang on there. That's the one I want.
That's 32.
So at 32, sorry. It looks like a 7 on my sheet. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So when Neville Chamberlain announced that, as he put it, no such undertaking had been forthcoming in a live radio broadcast, it was essentially the voice of a broken man, a man who had genuinely believed that the war could be avoided. Now, France declared war against Germany a few hours later. Soviet forces invaded Poland from the east on September the 17th, in accordance with the Molotov-Ribbentrop secret protocol. It's also little known that Slovenian forces also invaded Poland under German direction. Now, as we know, this event plunged the war into 6 long years of the most devastating and terrible war the world has ever seen. Slide 35. And ended eventually with the dropping of the 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But let's return for a minute to that question I posed right back at the beginning of last week's show. What really started World War II? Well, the honest answer is that there was no single cause. The war was a result of a chain of causes stretching back to at least 1919. The Treaty of Versailles, with its economic devastation of Germany, was a major factor in Germany's swing to the right. Of course, it could have gone the other way. It could have swung towards communism, because these 2 factors were the major forces in the interwar years. They were the major political dominating forces on the political landscape. The Great Depression that spread around the world. Slide 34, please, Alex. That Great Depression, beginning in New York, beginning on the New York Stock Exchange, and then spreading across the world, was the catalyst for the rise of Hitler and fascism, as millions of Germans sought desperately for a solution. The weakness of the new Weimar Republic almost created the vacuum into which Hitler exploded. In that vacuum, he exploited. The mistakes of the conservative politicians who believed that they could control and contain Hitler once they elected him chancellor, and who only succeeded in the end in enabling him. The failures of the international community to challenge the excesses of his racial policies or his expansionist ideas. The policies of appeasement, which Hitler saw as weakness and which he exploited. Each failure of the Allies, especially Britain and France, made his next move even bolder. The failure to build an effective alliance, especially with the Soviet Union, who was, again, exploited by Hitler. That was, again, something that was exploited. And perhaps you might say overarching all of this was the total inability of the League of Nations. Slide 35, please, Alex. Their total inability to enforce international law or take any meaningful action whatsoever in the face of Germany's flagrant violations of that international law. But perhaps above all, you might say, is the fact that the Second World War started because one man willed it. Slide 36, please, Alex. One man willed it, and the international community failed to stand up to him. Despite the fact that he had outlined all of this, he had outlined all of his plans in the mid-1920s. in Mein Kampf. Remove Hitler from the equation, and it's difficult to see how the world will actually come to World War II by 1939. The particular racial views that led to genocide were present across Europe, but Hitler made those views a reality. The ideas of racial purity and of Germany's destiny to rule Europe as the master race. This came from, well, partially from eugenics, coupled with a kind of mystical belief that Germans represented the Aryan race. And this contributed to the fascist power. And Hitler knew how to motivate and control. He knew how to motivate and control people, and he knew how to mold Germany into a militaristic ethno-state, convinced of its own right to rule. So in a way, he infected the German people with something that was perhaps lying dormant, but was there. And he brought it to the forth. So perhaps infected is the wrong word. He brought forth that which was lying dormant, a desperate need for Germany to seize, perhaps, it's what it saw as its rightful place. My goodness. Now I called these two programs the Mirror of History. And the reflection we see looking into the mirror of history is not exactly an exact one. But I think you might agree all of the main features are still there. And they're still with us today in one form or another. Slide 37, please, Alex. All of these features are still there. The beliefs, the supremacy, the ethno-state, an expansionist ethno-state, empire building, all of these things are still with us, just wearing different faces. And that is something that I think drove me to look at this period in history, because, as I said, this period led to an utterly devastating war that was to kill millions upon millions of people and change the entire face of the world. So perhaps when we look at these times, we can draw lessons, or at least we can see similarities, and we can say, do we really want to repeat these historic failures, these historic mistakes? But we are still bound and shackled to similar institutions. We are still bound and shackled to a toothless United Nations, which is essentially the inheritor of the League of Nations, but acts in a very similar way, in that it is a talking shop that produces an awful lot of paperwork, but nothing concrete. And that was exactly the failure of the League of Nations. It failed to do so in the face of clear, aggressive expansionism, driven by a deep-seated, almost, in these days, actually religious belief, but a belief coupled with mysticism and the idea of superiority when it came to Nazi Germany. But we're seeing the same thing again today, I believe. This expansionist idea, this desire to control, and a total and utter disregard for anyone else, a total disregard for international law, a total disregard for any country that speaks up. So perhaps we're not seeing an individual Hitler figure. Perhaps that figure, that the qualities of that figure, I think, have been more dispersed, but all the qualities are there, and mostly the inability of countries to act, and also the same relationship with Russia, whereas there was a great unwillingness to talk or include the Russians, include the Soviet Union. We now have the same relationship with Russia, with new Russia, but the same relationship. We don't want them involved. In fact, we're openly hostile to them. So many of the factors that led to World War II are in play today. And that is one of the reasons that kind of I didn't want to lay all this out before. I thought, well, I'll just have a brief word at the end. But really, it's up to you to see these things. It's up to us to recognize where we are, recognize the traits of individual figures, recognize the behavior of individual countries, and recognize the weakness and failures of institutions to actively stand against it. Okay, so with that, I will draw this piece, this double sort of header to a close, and leave you basically with food for thought. Okay, let me just shut the door because the insects are starting to come in. So. Well, and then we can obviously have a little chat. Oh, there we go. I don't know. It's kind of hard to comment on something that is like. The beginning of the Second World. How did we get to the beginning of the Second World War? This is all kind of history that we know, or we think we know.
Yeah.
We think we know about this, but the devil is in the detail. The devil is in the way that individual politicians and countries reacted, that made it almost. You can start to see as you go through it almost inevitable that World War II would happen. It was almost inevitable because at least towards the end of the 1930s, Hitler in particular was quite happy for this to happen because he believed that Germany could win against all comers. And so he was quite happy to try and foster the conditions that would lead to World War II, and he also had the signals that America had been giving off for years that they were really not interested in Europe, that they wouldn't intervene and they wouldn't get involved, and that played a very large part. Obviously, it changed. Maybe through manipulation, but it did change. So, yeah. Okay. I don't know what did you get from any of that?
The mirror is strong with this one. That's what I got from that, because, and I know that the difficulty is, and I will accept the difficulty is, you're telling this story in hindsight, having lived through the last 3-4 years, having lived through the last 6 months and having lived through the last few weeks and few hours. So there's always going to be that without you even knowing it in what you're saying. But the mirror is there, the reflection is there, a massive media control. It was one of the first things you said. A clampdown. Every day I look at Facebook, every day that I see any headline from any of the media, from the Tel Aviv graph, the very fact that I call it the Tel Aviv graph now.
Yeah.
The Herald is the latest one I'm seeing. The Daily Express, all of them is a massive media control. All of them is a massive pro-Israel narrative. Rise of anti-Semitism. If I've seen that phrase once, I've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times in the last week at all, and I'm not exaggerating. I wish I was. Rise of anti-Semitism. This stabbing, this firebomb, this attack. And despite the fact that the guy in question and to take the latest stabbing apparently attacked somebody earlier in the day who wasn't Jewish. But then nothing gets said about that. That doesn't get mentioned. Only the 2 victims that were Jewish. And it suddenly becomes fine and everyone's defending kicking him in the head. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't have been apprehended. I'm not saying that stabbing somebody is for any stage or any moment right. But the very nature of kicking somebody in the head suggests they're already on the ground. Why has that become suddenly justifiable? And I'm not doing any way defending the guy. It seems to have been disturbed and violent. But it's not a terrorist attack if he attacked somebody earlier that wasn't even part of the same religious group. There's no cause there. And people are out and out calling it a terrorist attack. But where is the ideological cause? Where is the political cause? Where is even the religious cause when the previous person he attacked in the same day wasn't Jewish? But it's a massive media control and it's a massive narrative being painted. Then you said the guy better Hitler than Le Bon. What was his name? I forget.
I'm missing almost every other word, Alex. I don't know if you can hear me. You're extremely broken up.
Not liking what I'm saying. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, it's the same kind of interference we get where you're stuttering along and you're starting to sound robotic, and then it all gets twisted.
Okay. We're going to go off 2 seconds. I'm going to flip the VPN.
Okay.
Yeah. Are we back? I think we're back. Can you hear me any better or not?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah. Hopefully it'll stay. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I hear the fact, and I'm not sure what the entire sort of what the actual figure is, but I hear the figure of that there are something like around about 4,000 stabbings a day in Britain. 4,000 people a day are stabbed at least in Britain.
And you're hearing about one of them.
One. Yeah. And it reminds me of the whole Australian thing. It reminds me of the way that America has gone about clamping down on anti-Semitism. And there are many voices here in Britain that would want to see the same kind of draconian clamp down. You've only got to listen to GB News, for God's sake, or not listen but read their posts, which I do, to get a kind of idea. Yeah. and it would have seemed that we're in some kind of a cesspit of anti-Semitic racial hatred pervades every sector of British society, that all of us sit here literally seething with hatred for Jewish people, not for any other reason, but that they're Jews, not for any other reason. It's just this visceral hatred that we seem to have, this vile racism that needs to be stamped out of us by, let's say, tighter laws, more suppression, more quashing down of the press. And I think it's the Telegraph have just been bought by a German company who have instructed all of its reporters that its number one priority is anti-Semitism, that the fight against anti-Semitism is the number one thing that they should be doing. And to me, this is so disproportional, so out of kilter with the reality that of Britain, that we are being gaslighted like there is no gaslight to light anymore. I think that's the stage we got to.
Yeah, it really is got to that level, because there's no fucking rise in anti-Semitism. There's a rise in anti-Zionism. There's a rise in calling the state of Israel out for their crimes. That is not being aimed at individual Jewish people purely for being of the Jewish religion. Nobody is condemning people for being of the Jewish religion. They're condemning people for supporting the Zionist state of Israel. But it has to be painted as the other one. Well. It has to be, which a good amount, especially of the Orthodox Jewish community across the world outside of Israel, fully agree with. And that's the bit they don't like to tell you. That's the bit they don't like to mention, because it doesn't match the narrative they're painting. And I know I'm sorry, but I'm not buying the fire bombings. I'm not saying they didn't get stabbed, but it's been picked up on that. Like you said, 4,000 stabbings per day or whatever. That one's been picked up on because it happened to have the right type of victim.
Yeah.
They're being used just like the people that suffered in the Holocaust are being used by an expansionist, genocidal, terrorist state. But no, somebody who marches in a protest is a terrorist according to the likes of Starmer. Somebody who says from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, is a terrorist according to the likes of Starmer. Somebody who says, let's globalize the infantata, whatever the bloody thing is. Intifada, even. Yeah. I don't even get the words right, but that's not me trying to call it.
All right, I know exactly what you mean.
Right.
No.
I'm deliberately trying to say it all, to be fair, because that's how stupid the whole idea is, that just by expressing these things, that suddenly makes you a terrorist. When the real terrorists are the people slaughtering babies and children in Gaza, slaughtering people in Lebanon, stealing every part of every level of riches is an exaggeration, but stealing the Lebanese gas fields, stealing the homes of people in the West Bank. They don't know what a terrorist is any more than the German propaganda was true. And
a government that is determined to stamp out rights that we have had in this country for hundreds of years. The right to trial by jury. Yes. The right even to express your beliefs, in which they're trying to do with the Palestine Action people. Yeah. The right to stop you expressing your motivation. We're not interested in what motivates you. Really? That seems to be all that there is when it comes to anti-Semitism. That's all they talk about.
Yeah.
You're motivated by hatred.
Yeah. Yeah. How can you
Yeah.
not? How can you not be allowed to put a defense? How can you have a trial where you are not allowed to put a defense? It's insane. Things I've always wondered about is more and more becoming obvious. I always wondered, I kept the National Express down to London a lot. Now, the thing with National Express, if you go in the daytime, it stops more places. If you go overnight, it hardly stops at all, which is a lot better. But you go in the daytime, it stopped Birmingham, it stopped Manchester, but it stopped one place in Birmingham, one place in Manchester. It always stopped one place in London. It would stop Heathrow and then it would stop Victoria. I've always wondered what it was about Golders Green that got it the right to its own stop on the National Express. Suddenly, that question's been answered.
Yeah.
Some communities get served a lot better with services than others. Let's just say that.
Yeah. I never knew there was a stop in Golders Green.
Oh, there is, yeah. It's fairly recent,
They don't
actually,
have-
as
yeah,
in the last
nowhere
couple of
else.
years. But it's I always wondered what they'd done or what was so special about Golders Green that got its own stop, because nowhere else does.
No. Well, now we know, don't we?
Now we know.
It's the chosen people live there.
The chosen
But
ones.
our government aren't even hiding it anymore. Everyone knows that our government, they're all most of the front bench belong to Labour Friends of Israel. Most of the opposition parties have got kind of structure. Israel has got the Israeli political system has got its feet under every single table. Every one of the world's, what you might call, the Western powers.
Yeah.
It has got its control and stranglehold over them. It has captured our press. It has, it has basically dictated the narrative, and it's ramped that dictation up over the course of these past couple of years, and we're now in a position where we're almost we're almost on the cusp of heresy laws. We've almost got to the point where it is illegal to criticize criticize the criticize the Zionist regime.
Yeah.
It is that way. I know. I think I reported it. That 40 American states, at least, and the rest are considering it, have got laws in place that actually makes it illegal to criticize the Israeli regime. How can we live in a world like that? How can we live in a world like that?
But it's how do you redefine? How do you claim there's a rise in anti-Semitism after you've redefined anti-Semitism? I mean, we should be used to it. They redefined an anti-vaxxer, so I suppose it's no different. But there's so much. How can you redefine something to create a situation that mirrors so much of what you're supposed to be against? Because you said better Hitler than, and I forget the guy's name. You said right at the start, you said they had an attitude of better Hitler than. Can you not hear me again?
Moving? Can people tell me if I'm moving? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. They don't like that sentence. It's the same sentence they chopped us off the last time. It doesn't matter who you said anyway. Can you still hear me in the chat? Let me know if you're watching and you can still hear us.
Yeah. Can you hear us out there?
We've lost Glenn completely from this end anyway. Hopefully he'll come back in a minute. But I'll make the point I was going to make before I get... Oh, he's come back in.
Okay, we're back.
We're back.
Yeah.
I won't repeat the same words again, but you said that it was
that
better.
is interesting. If you look in the comments, everyone's saying yes, we can. So the problem seems to be the communication between me and you.
Yeah,
which is weird.
Maybe. But the point I keep trying to make it every time it goes off, so I'm going to make it just out of stubbornness.
Go on, go for it.
You said early on that there was a phrase, better a certain person than a certain other person. You've lost me again. Have you seriously lost me again? They do not like it.
No, I can hear you now, but only when you started saying I'm going to carry on and make my point. That's when it broke.
I think that's out. Okay. But the point, the relevance is all we hear now is better Israel than Islam. Better Israel than the immigrants. Effectively, what we hear is better Israel than others, because it's that racist ability to look at the Israelis and see people like us. And we don't do the same when we look at Palestine. We don't do the same when we look at Iran. We don't do the same when we look at, to take America as the other side of that, flip side of that coin. Better America than Venezuela, than Cuba, than anybody that we look at, and they might look a bit different, or they're a different country, or speak a different language, or they have a different set of ideals, a different political ideology. We see other, and that's that same attitude all over again as it was with better the painter than somebody else.
Yeah, I was just better Hitler than Leon Blum. That was the kind of the attitude, the kind of French attitude at the time, because it's like it's like the saying better dead than red or whatever. Although it was the other way around, better red than dead. But we are presented with only two sort of blocks. It's either we completely support Israel, we completely support all of their terror campaigns, all of their genocides, we completely support what America is doing around the world in support of the Israelis. It's either that, or we're all going to be living under Sharia law, and we'll be kept as virtual slaves by Muslim overlords. It's not, you can't have one. You can either have this or you can have this, and that is the only two options that are being presented to us right now. And many people who are hard of thinking actually absorb this shit. They absorb this in, and it's spewed out again in the vileness of GB News, let's say.
Yeah. So, and that's the problem. If they it's bad enough that they absorb it, but the problem is they will insist on regurgitating it and repeating it and posting lies after lies after lies, mainly because they're too stupid to double check what they're posting.
Exactly.
They don't do their due diligence. They don't check a word of it. I saw the other one, the one the other day was I can't remember, but an old age pensioner gets such and such, and an immigrant gets £250 a week. Where? In what world ever? Because there is no version where that is true. There is no circumstance where that is remotely true. You just made that up, mate. Or the person you shared it from, and this is where the problem comes. The person you shared it from made it up, or the person they shared it from made it up. But somebody did a no fucker afterwards, checked it. They got horrified. They hit their angry buttons. They hit their thing. No fucker checked the facts.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what bloody happened. Nobody questioned whether what was being said was right. They heard the shock horror. They heard the defense of what was happening for Germany. And well, that seems the best thing we can do. This is our best option. Look what's going on. The same propaganda that today is against anyone supporting Palestine or speaking up for Iran was against the Soviet Union as the alternate, was against any of the communist countries, because it was against the rising up of people. Now, I'm not a communist, I don't claim to be, but it was against the people rising up against their overlords. That's what it was really opposed to. It wasn't getting into the problems and the actual issues with communism. There are plenty. It was seeing a chance of the people throwing over the 1%. And that's why they feared it. Now, I'm not a communist. I don't necessarily agree with that ideology. But I still maintain that the reason the West was so opposed was what was remained of the ancien regime, was what remained that we nowadays call the elite or the bloodlines or the 1% or all of these. It was the fear of the common man rising up. And that's what they don't like. No, but every part of it, what have you said tonight, is a mirror. Japan got called to task and they just walked out and left. Israel got called to task and they rip up the UN Constitution. We're talking about, they talked about, they saw a rearmament of Germany and compulsory national service. Oh, look, what was it by 2039? And now, thing is,
all of the same drivers, all of the same motivations, all of the same, even right down to what you might call charismatic leaders. You've got figures out there whipping people's biases, feeding them those biases in the first place, and then using those levers to get them out onto the street, to get them politically motivated. Where unless you vote for Fuckwit Farage or that, what's the other guy? What's the party I can figure? Yeah, the one that the real right-wing fuckwits. But we're being driven into their arms.
Yeah,
we are being driven into their arms, and the failures of Starmer and the complete shitstorm of his entire term as prime minister has driven even more people into their arms. We are being nudged to the right, constantly nudged to the right. And this was exactly the situation that allowed Hitler to rise. Okay, there were stress factors involved in post-war Germany. There was a lot of hardship. There was the whole reparations thing. There were a lot of factors, but essentially it's the same playbook.
Yeah,
it's the same playbook that when people feel under threat, when people feel like they've got a lot to lose, they will go for an extreme. And it very much looks to me like people are I think we've just got, I don't know how many reform councillors that we've now got, but there was certainly going to be they were expecting a very large number in the local elections. And so we are seeing the same swing to the right. So everything when you when you talk about Newtonian politics, when you talk about the nudge theory, I mean, this is not a nudge. We're not. I no longer feel like we're being nudged. I feel like we're being flicked as hard as we can possibly be flicked. You know, this is not some 4-year-old flick. We're being flicked by a proper flick, and
become
you
the
can
pinball.
see
It's no longer Sabutia. It's become the bloody pinball.
yeah. But the analogies are good and they work, and you can picture them.
Yeah.
So yeah. So
it's exactly that, and I'm sat here when you're saying that, going, "Oh fuck," because I've been talking about the Newton's cradle, and I've been talking about they pulled us so far to the left with the whole woke ideology, with all of that it would have an equal and opposite reaction in sending people to the right. Well, if they did, if I'm right, and if they did, they knew it would, because it happened before. They knew it was because it happened in the 30s. It threw people straight into fascism.
Yeah.
That's why they knew it would happen, because it already had. And it's the problem is, because every time, and you talk to people about reform, you talk to people about restore, every time people always believe that the fascists, or in this day and age, the politicians, they aren't really going to do exactly what they've already told you they're going to do in their manifestos, in Mein Kampf.
Yeah,
we always believe they're not going to do exactly what they've already told us they're going to do, like privatize the health service, for one.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, I'll say it again. If you're in Scotland and you've read Reform's manifesto and you're going to vote for them, you're a fucking idiot. And again, I've still got so many more on the Mirror. We said we're not actually involved. We're not actually involved in the Spanish Civil War. We're not actually involved in Iran.
No, we're not. No, nothing to do with us. No, we're not. We're not involved. No, we're not. Send more bombs. Yeah, we're not involved. No.
And it always starts with apparent investment in infrastructure. It always starts with that. Look, everything they're pushing in the Gaza, in the Trump's plan and Trump Gaza, there's always this side of investment in infrastructure. Just like when Marshall Wade built the autobahns. Oh dear, did I just mix up two parts of history there?
Yeah.
Because history rhymes to the past as well as to the future.
Yeah. I don't know. And it almost feels fruitless to even point this shit out, because that was a long time ago. That was a long time ago. It really wasn't. It really wasn't that long ago. Yeah. It's still now on the edge of living memory, but it's something that happened that was very well documented.
Yeah.
Very well. People have studied this. People know exactly how we got from one situation to the other situation. You can track it. It's got a lot of moving parts. There are a lot of, there are players doing this and that and the other, but you can follow where it inevitably was going to end. And that was probably clear by, maybe by 1936, 37, it was very clear that Hitler was playing everyone. He was playing everyone at their own game. He was letting those people who were sort of, you might say, had pacifistic he was playing their tune to them. He was allowing, he said, oh yeah, we're willing to deal, we're willing to appease, but yeah, it's a little bit like negotiating and then killing the negotiators. It's we're willing to negotiate, bomb them. That's exactly the same. It's the same tactics, same thing.
Change. just doesn't change. The whole deciding the fate of a country without representation by that country. That's all we ever see. I'm not even gonna get into the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, because that's the first time in my history that I realized that I cannot keep on topic, because I had a TMA on the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, and 5 minutes in I got distracted thinking, I wonder if that's where Molotov cocktail comes from.
Which is the first thing.
The next hour of my wife's time I should have been doing.
Yeah, well, it's the obvious link, isn't it? Yeah. I think it actually is. So it's named after him.
Actually, yeah. It comes from more of an insult in nature, because it was a homemade weapon almost.
Yeah,
when Russia wasn't acting because of the pact, and Finland were, it was kind of used as a derogatory term anyway. But all that aside, that's when I first learned. I went off on tangents and couldn't keep on a topic. This is maybe a tangent, but this is what it all comes back to. That all this has happened before, and all of it will happen again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, nobody does anything. You said about it being inevitable. Is it inevitable? But it became inevitable because no one does anything. No country ever speak out. No countries will act against Israel any more than any acted against Germany or the Nazis. Let's not get the two muddled up in some ways. There's no power in the League of Nations, and there's no power in the UN. Both were and are paper tigers.
Yeah.
But I don't see the inevitability. I argue the inevitability because it comes right back. Well, I know I'm not going to start quoting, well, I am. Start quoting songs again, but it comes right back to me to the whole Universal Soldier song, and it's, without him, how could Hitler have condemned him at Le Bon? Without him, Caesar would have stood alone. He's the one, he gives his body as the weapon of the war, and without him, all this fighting can't go on. He's a universal soldier, and he really is to blame. His orders come from far away no more. They come from here and there, and you and me. And brother, can't you see this is not the way we put the end to war? Because the real reason these things are inevitable is because of the silent majority. The silent majority stay silent. They never speak up. They will never do a damn thing because they're scared by threats of arresting them if they say, let's globalize in. I wish I could say that, but I can't actually fucking say it because I can't get the words out, not because I won't. They're too scared to say from the river to the sea because some fuckwit in a suit is busy trying to distract from the trial of the three Ukrainian rent boys by pushing how we can't say this and we can't say that.
Oh, what did I hear on that trial? I hear I think it's something to do with the prosecution. The prosecution have come up with this way of making it like, well, it's all a Russian plot.
No,
it is all a Russian plot. And these three rent boys, there were originally five, I think, but these three were all paid by this guy. What was his name? El Monet. This mysterious Russian guy called El Monet. And it's nothing to do with Starmer. They did not know Starmer. They were not involved.
Where two of his houses were then? How does this Russian guy know where two of his houses were?
Well,
and aren't we a little concerned about the security of the country if some Russian spy knows where a former house and the current house of the Prime Minister
and
is,
the
cars of the Prime Minister?
Yeah, these poor rent boys, they never even knew who Starmer was. They'd never heard of him. but they were willing to do. They were willing to do this bombing, this firebombing, whatever, for money, because they were paid by this El Monet, not Monet, Money, Monet, Money, I think it is, or it could be EY. It's either El Money or El Monet. Somebody in the chat might know. It's something like that.
Yeah,
it sounds like
I'm pretty sure they were paid, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't for bombing the cars or blowing up the house.
No,
I'm pretty sure it wasn't by El Money either.
No, show us El Money. Yeah. Whoever came up with that name, it's not really a Russian name, is it? Unless that's some kind of pseudonym. No.
Yeah, I suspect it is a pseudonym.
Yeah. So, but what they've done there, and this is the prosecution. The prosecution have established that this idea that there is no connection between these three and Starmer. No connection. They did it for other reasons other than to get back at him for something. That's why they did it. And Starmer can walk away and say, well, I never knew them. They said, well, we never knew him. I've never even heard of him. This has been established from the opening sort of salvos in the trial. It's bizarre.
Are they going along with it? Are the remedies going along with it?
I don't know. I don't. What day are we in now?
All they've got to say is go along with this, or she'll go into the front line.
A lot better. Yeah. Yes. Strangely enough, yeah, they managed to avoid that. Yeah. Anyway,
I don't think
this is where we are.
Is inevitable, but it's inevitable because people will do nothing. It's inevitable because people will do.
I'm very much convinced that Starmer will probably walk away from this. It won't stick. He's greasier than I don't know, last week's chip fat. He's a very, very greasy man. He's very slippery, and he seems to be able to. Nothing is ever his fault. Nothing is ever Starmer's fault. Peter Mandelson, nothing to do with me. Bad advice. Rent Boys, no, nothing to do with me. It's this El Monet character. Nothing to do with me at all. And well, all right, yeah, sort of. I don't know. He is very Teflon, very much a Teflon sort of guy. So, unfortunately,
yeah, you're probably right, but I don't even know the answer.
I don't know.
There's nothing
in the end. No.
There's nothing following him that's going to be any better anyway. Even if he's gone the next lots, well,
exactly. That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, what choice have we then got? What choice have the Labour Party then got if Starmer is quietly shuffled, off stage left? We've just got a bucket of fuckwits to choose from. Who have we got? We've got Wes Streeting. We've got Ed Miliband. We've got Rachel Reeves. I don't know, any one of these fucking Labour friends of Israel idiots.
To be handing out the olive branch to now, any or something.
Yeah. Bring back Tony Blair.
Well, that'll be the next one, I'm sure.
I wouldn't surprise if that got mooted either, because he's like the eternal bad penny. You can't get rid of him. Just when everybody's forgotten about him, he crops up again in some other made up role, a job that they've made up for him. So I think he must have a lot of dirt on a lot of people.
Oh yeah,
he's like an evil goblin, I don't know.
That's an insult to goblins, to be fair.
Right. Okay. I think we're descending into ridiculous now. But,
yeah.
And it is bloody ridiculous. And that's the way, that's the mood of the nation tonight. Bloody ridiculous. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So having said all that, and try in some way to get, hopefully, to get the message across of people to investigate things, to to look into stuff and say, well, hang on, that sounds an awful lot like what's going on right now. What was the upshot of what happened? Let's look at this and say, are we seeing history playing again? Are we seeing us doomed to repeat the same mistakes?
Yeah.
And perhaps if we learnt those lessons, then we could just maybe avoid doing it. But human nature being as it is, we're slow to learn and very quick to forget, I think.
Most definitely. Most definitely. By choice most of the time, I think, then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's too much bother. Too much bother. Just, I'm all right. I'm fine. I mean, it's not going to affect me. Nothing affects us. We'll just go along, keep our heads down, and everything will be fine. Well, it won't. And it never has been. And it always turns out badly. Not you.
Because it's always the same fucking playbook. Whichever side of it we're on, we're still on the same side.
Yeah.
Because the fucking playbook originates with the British state. And we've been using the same one since back in the 17th century.
Yeah.
And then we used it and expanded it to America, and America stole the same playbook, and they've been using it since 1776.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Just a shift of emphasis. The empire shifted and remained the same, but it's just being administered by a different country.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Anyway,
right. Let's wrap up, Alex. Let's wrap up. I think people suffered us enough, and I hope you enjoyed those series. I don't know what I'm going to do next week. Perhaps something a bit more topical, but we, as we always say, you don't know what's happening from one week to the next.
No.
Where are we? Where are we going to go? It's anybody's guess. So we'll see. We'll see. Indeed, Susan, it's time we dug our way out of this prison. Okay. It's time we stopped letting that swing happen, back and forward, repeating the same mistakes, voting for the same. Oh well, I can't even get into it. Blue and red and blue and red and red and blue and fucking jeez.
Letting ourselves be manipulated by people is what we're doing, and what we do over and over again. We have an attitude that, unity. We don't understand the unity that we should be finding. And we try to find the unity that we shouldn't be finding. We allow ourselves to be manipulated. We allow ourselves to be made to do stuff we shouldn't do. We shouldn't want to do because somebody in power tells us to. And we just fall for it every time after time after time. But anyway, like I said, it's not going to be solved tonight. So we will wrap it up. And it's
very mood tonight.
Sorry?
So I'm kind of in a reticent mood, Well, not, I wouldn't say reticent. I don't know, just it's like learning a fucking foreign language and nobody else speaks it. And you think, why have I wasted my time? Why the fuck am I wasting my time doing this? when nobody else speaks it. It's like learning ancient Mongolian.
Mm.
Say, well, we've got a lot of lessons to learn from ancient Mongolian. Fuck them. Yeah. Well, we don't need to know anything. I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just waffling. Let's wrap up.
Yeah, I know where you're going with it, but
Yeah,
you gotta
no,
make one point, and at some point, people stop just learning ancient Mongolian for the fun of it and realize the relevance it has to society, to where we are, and get the balls to actually act upon it, to actually go out and speak fucking ancient Mongolian to people.
Yeah, to the masses.
To the masses.
Yeah,
right.
Brilliant.
We will actually wrap up this time. So it's Friday evening now. We'll be back Sunday at 1:50 with Lone Gunman Rides again. I'll be back Sunday evening at 8 p.m. with Last Jacobites International. I'll be back on Tuesday with The Gleam in the North at 9 p.m. Ian will be back on Wednesday at 7 p.m. with Smokem. And Glenn will be back next Friday with more from the Man in Black. Possibly a lesson in ancient Mongolian.
I don't think I could learn that in a week.
That'll be the week after. Take care.
Good night.
I will see you soon. Good night.
Good night.